suspended, was charged with criminal assault causing bodily harm.
Yep.
And he ended up pleading guilty and was sentenced to 1 year probation and 80 hours of community service.
Seems rather light when you're basically, if the guy never played again, you've ended his career.
Yeah,
now, granted, he gave that other guy a concussion.
Correct.
But
you could say that was dirty, right?
Sure.
But it was in the course of the game in terms of that happens.
Yeah.
And you could suspend that guy, whatever, but that's in the course of the game. What Bertuzzi did here was he sucker punched him from behind, where the guy he can't defend himself. He falls straight down. Now, he ended up suing civilly the Canucks organization
because it was almost like an organized effort to go after him.
His career ended, so there was a settlement. There was a settlement reached. And here's the thing with Bertuzzi. So no, the stick wasn't used in this one, a weapon, but that's so egregious. I think from behind where
you broke somebody's back.
But again, hockey's the one where I think it just seems criminally where the criminal justice system gets involved.
And here's my other thing about hockey, though. If you think about it. A lot of times you see these fights, and I mean, let's be real. The old joke used to be like, "Hey, I went to a boxing match and a hockey game broke out." It's just like you go to watch the fights a lot of times. I used to go to the Rangers games all the time. You love to see the fights, but it's two people fighting with each other. You understand what I'm saying? So, in a legal sense, there, in a law enforcement sense, that's always like that quote unquote mutual combatants. It's like, okay, you knew you were getting into a fight, you got into a fight, and it's over, it's done. Yeah. So I think that's why you don't see really anything ever really come out of that. Yeah. And that's just the way it is. But when you, like you said, when you start getting like sticks involved and you start getting like sucker punches involved and people breaking backs, that's a little different.
Now here's
go ahead. I was going to say, I remember one, and I couldn't even tell you the names. Like I used to watch hockey. That's the only sport I ever really used to watch. And there was the one time, if the play was over, the play was whistled dead. They were all by the goal, and this one dude comes up, and if anybody knows what a cross check is, you take the stick in both hands and you just shove it out. And this guy cross checked this dude straight in the head, even though he had a helmet on it. I mean, he almost killed him. I mean, really almost killed him.
So there was two other hockey cases that are pretty famous or infamous. Marty McSorley.
Oh, I remember that name. I remember that. What was one of that?
Hit Donald Brashear in the head. This was in 2000, February of 2000. So basically, Marty McSorley's kind of older up there in his career. Yep. He gets into a fight with Donald Brashear, right? Just the kind of normal, and it was Canucks again, Bruins and Canucks. On as I said, February 24th, 2000. Brashear kind of got the best of McSorley, kind of rubbed it in, whole 9 yards. McSorley kind of trying to save face. Basically follows Brashear as they skate down the ice and basically slashes him or hits him in the side of the head.
Yeah, with the stick.
With a stick.
Yeah, the slash is like when you kind of raise it up over your head.
So Brashear falls to the ice. He's unconscious. Looks. It doesn't just look nasty. It is nasty. McSorley ends up suspended for the remainder of the season, 23 games. He never played in the NHL again. That's how his career ended. Yeah. He was later charged with assault. Yep. So there you go. Criminal justice system getting involved. He was found guilty of assault with a weapon and sentenced to 18 months probation. Yeah. So again, here we go. Sticks involved, right? And it's the other incident we talked about happened after a fight, right? Right. This one happens after a fight. Right. And again, can't use a weapon. And the third one that came up doing the research, Dino Ciccarelli. Basically, he was a forward. I don't believe he was in the NHL back then. I think he was playing for a club team.
Right. Junior hockey, they usually call it. Yeah.
He ended up getting suspended. It was a really hard hit against the boards. Looks like it just looked real dirty. And he was charged and convicted of assault. He was fined $1,000 and sentenced to 1 day in jail. Again, I want to say sticks were involved in this one too, and there was. It was like a real nasty slash with the stick. And then he hit him over the head with the stick, and as you can tell, I'm kind of watching it right now again. I didn't remember, but again, sticks involved. And you're charged.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's rules about it. I mean, you can't even you're not supposed to raise your stick above your waist in hockey, if I understand right. You always want to say, like, okay, you all sign waivers and say if you're going to beat the shit out of each other with the sticks, it's like it's a given or not. Hey, how about you don't? But I mean, it's a violent sport, but like we said, it's extracurricular when you start taking that stick.
Well, and that's the thing. Again,
on the head with
I don't advocate the criminal justice system getting involved in athletics and sports. And we talked about it. We had a kid running track, a high school event here in Florida.
We talked about it on the show, right?
Did.
Yeah.
Just to set it up again in case you haven't heard, he was running the 1600, which is the mile.
Right.
As he's running the laps, there's another contestant that does another event that's not in that race.
Involved in that race.
And for whatever reason, he wanders into the track. He's in the way.
Yeah.
So this kid that's running this 1600 is the leader, pushes him out of the way.
Right.
Pushes him. You're in the track. Get out of the way.
Right.
Well, that kid takes exception to it, tracks him down from behind, and sucker punches him from behind. There's video of that, too.
It's
you can
all
find
on video,
that.
Yep.
So I did a little research. Basically, it's that family wanted to press charges, they're saying.
Yes, they did.
The sheriff's office that showed up on the scene said, well, if you press charges, he's going to press charges because he pushed him first.
Yep.
I understand what the deputy was saying. I don't necessarily agree with that. But no charges were end up filed that day.
Right.
But now this family where the runner got sucker punched is looking for civil suits. And then you can always charge after the fact as well. I think it's Osceola County. It's a county south of here. They need to just kind of review everything because the family's not going to let it go. They have an attorney.
It's how do you let that go? I mean, the kid's mind. I mean, I think he got injured. I don't know what the injuries were to the kid that.
I'm not sure either, but I think we'll hear more about that for sure. But I guess the thing you should take away from this podcast is, although you don't want to see law enforcement get involved with violence in sports,
you're saying they should police themselves.
But if it's extracurricular, above and beyond, law enforcement can step in.
Sure,
they don't want to, but they can.
Sure.
And I almost think at the high school level,
that's a whole different ball.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, there's no in the NBA and the NFL. I mean, there's big suspensions. There's a lot of money. There's civil infractions. There's a lot of things that punish people, right?
Sure.
You don't really get that at the high school level, right? I mean, you might get a suspension.
Yeah. Which could mess around with it.
But that's why I think you have to look at that. You got to look at that closely. And it reminds me, so when I was an assault and battery detective, I think I told you on this podcast, I did assault and battery for a few years. Part of that where I was
a little bit of everything.
I was the liaison for domestic violence, but it was, what year was this? 2009, maybe?
Right.
2009, I want to say. Split the difference. I don't know if it was 08 or 10, but 2009, there's and my boss gives it to me. I don't know why, but Dr. Phillips High School is a really big high school in Orlando. Yep. So if you've ever been to Orlando and you've been to Universal Studios, it's right behind Universal Studios. A huge high school. It's 5,000 or 6,000 students. It's one of these real big high schools.
It's got like a couple different buildings.
It's right. It's right behind Universal Studios. So whenever there's a sporting event and they show Universal Studios, you can always see Dr. Phillips High School. And it's a lot of great players that come out of there.
Yeah.
So the football team, there's a battery case, and ultimately hazing. So what happened was they had a rule back then that if you were on the varsity football team, you were only allowed in the varsity locker room. Okay, and obviously for a couple reasons. One, that's something I want to make it to the varsity locker room. I want to earn it.
That right. Yeah.
And two, if anything ever comes up missing or stolen out of the locker room, no one else is in here. It's something. It's the team is responsible for that. So the way the locker room is, in the back of the locker room is where their equipment room is, where you would go to get your helmet fixed or get a new helmet, and so the equipment room's back there.
Right.
So there's two ways you can get there. You can walk through the varsity locker room and walk straight down, or there's a couple doors where you can walk outside of the locker room and around and get in.
Right.
So this particular case, a freshman who wasn't on the varsity team walks in the locker room, and one of the older players says, "Hey, you're not supposed to be in here." And he gives him grief. He's like, "Yeah, whatever, I can be in here." He's like, "No, man, you're not supposed to be in here." He goes, "Whatever." So he walks into the locker room, and a couple players grab him, give him Charlie horses. They're hitting on him, and they end up picking him up and putting him headfirst into a big trash can. So by the letter of law, it was battery. It's unwanted touching.
Would you say, based on the investigation, would you say that was more of like a malice kind of thing, or were they kind of like, hey, almost like a big brother, little brother, because they're on the same team, right?
Well, he was one of the junior varsity players.
But it's still Dr.
Same
Phillips,
school,
right?
correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't listen. I don't.
Or is it bad to ask you to comment?
No.
Like that?
I mean, the case is over with. I don't care. At the end of the day, the family of the young man that got put in the garbage can wanted to press charges, right? Goes back to what we're saying. Do you want to or do you not to? By the letter of the law, it's battery.
Yeah.
So he was charged with battery. Now, what had happened was there was probably 4 or 5 kids that were actually involved. I think there was like one of those really chintzy, like plastic kind of like chairs that that mimic the wood ones. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
One of those was in there and was broken in half. That kind of got flipped towards him as well. Might have hit him. So the family claim. I'm not getting into what the family claim, but by the letter of the law, it was battery. Okay,
it's a lot. Yeah.
So I had to charge a certain amount of people, and then the state attorney's office, leaves my hands. They have meetings and stuff. So they basically were kind of split in. They wanted to charge an enhancement of hazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like that FAMU.
I'll be honest with you. To me, it wasn't hazing because this wasn't a ritual thing. This was a thing where you're not supposed to be in the locker room. They told him no. He went in there and they were like, "We're gonna get you," type stuff. We're gonna punch you and get out of here. Don't come in here. It wasn't a routine thing. It had never been done before.
It's like the kid was subjecting himself to it so he can hang out in the
So
varsity.
there was no. Yeah, I didn't think it rose to hazing. The state attorney wanted hazing, so they charged it.
What was the enhancement on that? What does hazing carry with it? Like the enhancement, does it turn into a felony or something? Or
it may have. I don't even recall.
It's just an enhancement.
Here's the thing, though. Everything was juvenile.
Right.
So in Florida, juvenile court, there's no jury.
No,
the judge is the jury. The judge listens to the case. And so I remember a couple of the kids basically in juvenile, they basically pled out. And a couple of them said, yeah, I was wrong. They had to write a letter and apologize. I shouldn't have did it. And if they stay out of trouble for a year, their record's clean. Okay. One of those. Continuing.
It's like it's not like pretrial diversion. There's a term for the juvenile.
But for it's like pretrial diversion, but for juvenile. So a couple of them did that. But a couple of the other ones were like, no, screw that. And so they went to trial. So I went to trial.
I always love those juvenile trials.
And, and the judge acquitted them. The judge was saying, there's not enough here. So they were straight out. And I think probably the enhancement of hazing that got lopped in there kind of hurt.
It's like an overcharge.
So, and so that was one of those incidents where my boss was like, well, you're a football player. Take this case. I didn't want anything to do with that. Because then that's the one the mom drove on the field as with her car. She was mad at the coaches and the kids. Yeah. Luckily, she didn't hit anyone, but she was charged with aggravated assault with a motor vehicle. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess.
Well, what was the defense argument there for the judge to acquit? I mean, I know juveniles is actually tough. Like when you sit and go to juvenile, a lot of times the judge tends to side with the prosecution and law enforcement. No, I shouldn't say that. I mean, but I know in my case,
I just remember. The one. So the couple kids that took it to trial. Yeah, it really was more like you can't prove it that I actually did anything. So what happened was the school. I'm gonna explain to you. Yeah. So the school took before we got involved. Yeah. The school took statements of all the players in the locker room. Okay. Mm-hmm. And as you can imagine, they were like crummy statements. Yeah. But one of them said a couple of this, actually not one statement. If I have my memory right, one statement said a certain player did something. Okay. He denied that.
So the person that wrote that statement
said that another player did a couple things to the victim.
Right.
Okay. The one player said, no, I didn't do anything. But the state attorney off that statement said, we need to charge that kid too. Okay.
Did they bring that kid in to testify?
I'm not going to say his name. That kid's in the NFL right now. Nice. That's how good he was.
There you go.
I'm not going to say his name. So that is why he got charged. But that was really the only evidence.
So you have an eyewitness.
Well, that kid never. I don't think that kid ever came and testified
as
well.
So then you got nothing else.
There was some stuff there that the judge ultimately acquitted him, and then the family. There was a lot of civil suit. There was a lot of stuff that going on. Yeah. I mean, I don't care about the civil.
It's always fun when you get involved in the cases and the civil, and they call you up like both sides.
And the thing is, obviously I'm the detective on the case, so. Yeah. I am technically the witness for the prosecution, but I'm actually a witness for the defense too, because I'm just telling you how it is.
Yep.
This is what happened. Yep. This is what my investigation showed. Because I'll remember the state attorney saying, "Hey, like, kind of questioning me a little bit." I'm like, "Look, this is what happened."
Yeah,
and letter of the law, it's battery. I charged it, but. this thing has gotten out of hand. And of course, it always gets out of hand and,
Right.
and stuff like that if there's some star players involved.